a few opening comments on the topic and also introducing our presenters today. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hello, it's Byron White with the Division of DD, the Employment Coordinator for the Division. I want to welcome all of you back for a second webinar that was with us yesterday, and then for new folks joining us today, welcome to you as well. Really appreciate Suzanne and the SLN staff for helping us put these events on in a very professional kind of way. They're very tech savvy, a skill that I definitely don't possess. So thanks again to Ellen and Suzanne and the folks there for making this possible. As I mentioned yesterday, we are really trying to, we as a division are working hard to offer some good information to you and our service providers that we hope you find beneficial as you begin planning how you're going to resume your service delivery. Of course, employment is the focus of my work, but the information today will address both employment as well as other community engagement. At this point, it's looking like a return to a facility-based model as we have known probably won't be the same. And we've got to figure out how we can still support people in new settings that will ensure, you know, their safety and well-being. No one has the answers. We are hearing across the United States, all states are struggling as well. Our division, we're working every day to try to put some things in place to support your work. We are not doing this alone. We have work groups assembled that include representatives from provider agencies and advocacy. So it's a group effort as we try to make these plans of moving forward. So hopefully you're getting some feedback and opportunities to offer input to some of the folks representing your organizations. We have one additional event scheduled after today that's kind of ties into these first two events. We're actually having an interactive workshop on June the 23rd at 1 o'clock that you'll be getting an official flyer on hopefully by Monday that will have a little bit more information. But it will be a panel of experts, including, of course, our presenters today. We'll have some division, DD division leaders on the call, a VR representative, and some actual service providers who have had some success already with kind of moving in a new direction with their service delivery. But we have released a survey. It went out, I think, on Friday. They were asking input from your organization, just some brief information from your organization, and an opportunity also for you to kind of tell us what you're feeling like you need more information about as it pertains to trying to get back up and running. So if you haven't seen that survey, talk to your leader and see if someone has submitted the survey. And if they say they haven't seen it, then maybe make contact with your local CSD and ask for that email and survey link. It should have gone back out again yesterday, and we extended the deadline now until Monday. So we would really like your input if at all possible. But the workshop will have a registration link, and I'm going to post the flyer. So if you don't end up not seeing a flyer, excuse me, go to the AL-APSE website, and it will be posted there as well. And if you don't know that website, it's pretty simple. It's just www.al-apse.org, and we'll hopefully put that in the chat box so you can see it. I'm very appreciative again today for Tom Wiles and Genni Sasnett taking some time out to share a lot of good information regarding their experiences with getting people out of buildings into their communities. They became really good at this long before HCBS and COVID-19. All the answers to ease your COVID concerns, they will be able to share some good information for you to consider to make the process of supporting people in a more community-based setting hopefully a little bit easier for you. Tom and Genni have been in our state now. I believe Genni was here maybe a year before Tom for about 5 years, working directly with some of our provider agencies in helping them sort of self-assess their programs and begin developing transformation plans to, again, move people in a new direction. So probably some of you that have received that technical assistance are on our call today. So I don't want to take up a whole lot more time. Again, thanks to Tom and Genni. Thanks to Suzanne and SLN. And I'm turning it back to you, Suzanne.
Great, thank you, Byron, and welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Genni and Tom. They have already shared through yesterday's session some really great ideas and reminders of what has gotten us to this point in our field. So we're excited to now think about some of the opportunities that are presenting themselves as we're coming out of the shutdown, as we look at all of the person-centered thinking and planning concepts that have been used throughout our systems now for over a decade in a really strong fashion. And we're presented with new challenges. So Genni and Tom, we welcome you to help us think about how we come out of this awkward, challenging time and into a new place with even higher ideas and standards and goals.
All right. Well, thank you. Again, for those of you who may not have been with us yesterday, I'm Genni Sasnett. This over here is Tom Wiles. We won't go through our whole long bios today. We simply say that Tom was the CEO and I was the COO of an agency headquartered in Washington, D.C. and providing services in a number of other states. And we were there for 30-some years. During our tenure, we were able to transform the agency, and Tom will talk to you in a little more detail in a minute about how we were able to do that. It is that experience, along with the experience that we've had over the past half dozen years working for ODEP, doing some stuff for ICI and individual work with states, helping agencies transform, that bring us to you today with the expertise that we do have. We're going to start with a poll, though, and I'm going to ask Suzanne to bring that up, and let's see where you are. Go ahead, Suzanne. Okay, so the question we're kind of wondering where you're at. So the question is, does your agency currently have an effective community-based services program that serves as a pathway to community inclusion and community integrated employment? In other words, how are you doing moving towards community services?
Suzanne, can all the participants see the results?
They should be able to.
Okay.
And Tom, you guys will be mentioning the responses that you are seeing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have about 32% of the vote. When we get at least to 50%, then we will proceed. So if you haven't voted, just jump in there, please.
Looks like we're not moving.
Yeah, we are.
Oh.
Okay. See, about 40%, a few more. So we get a pretty good sampling here, would be helpful. Okay.
So a real mix.
Yeah, I think we're just going to proceed. Feel free to continue voting, but as you will be able to see, and what we suspected is that we have a pretty good mix of people. We have some people, about 37% of people who've responded so far who are on board and achieving some good outcomes already. There's about 23% who are not quite there. They're still considering themselves a work in progress. There's another 30% that are just getting started. And then there's a small percentage, but an important one, about 9% of folks who have not yet got started. So thank you, Suzanne. We can close the poll now. And thank you all for voting. We appreciate your participation.
Yeah, that's good information.
Okay. Can we close the poll? I close the poll. Okay. I will. All right, we're not able to. Okay. All right, now we're advancing. All right, so this is our world right now, right? It has turned completely upside down. There was a way of life that we knew, there were goals that we had, there were things that we were making progress with, and lo and behold, the whole thing is kind of blown up. And so that has been very traumatic. That continues to be traumatic for all of us. And there's a lot of pain all around us. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. It's not like we can just put that under the rug and no big deal. It is very important. Some of us have lost loved ones. And I know some of you there who have lost some of the people you support. And I know that's been devastating. We heard we lost staff from our former agency and we're quite devastated by that ourselves. And so that's been very hard. Some folks have lost jobs. Some people have had reduced hours. Some people have had neither of those things happen yet, and yet their jobs are still in jeopardy. Our family lives are not what they used to be. I've got kids at home and people working from home and all kinds of things. So our family lives are disrupted. The agencies have been taken to their knees financially and in other ways due to the pandemic and all the impacts thereof. So that all of that shakes our sense of security, it challenges your faith, and all of our hearts are right now, we're carrying a very heavy load. And so I just wanted to take this time to acknowledge that and to say to you that it's important just to take some time to grieve our losses. Every day, I think of a little thing that I used to do that I can no longer do, and I'm saddened by that. And I know that all of you are as well. So I just wanted, again, to acknowledge it's been a tough time. We have a lot of loss and we are grieving. So now we really have to find ways to heal ourselves and heal our communities and move into the future. And the problem is that we don't exactly know what that future is going to look like. But what we do know, and what I hope that you will embrace, is the notion that change can lead to opportunity. And I think there's plenty of opportunity that is arising. And we want to, as I said earlier in a conversation to Suzanne, we want to be opportunistic. We want to acknowledge those losses from the back, but we want to move into the future and be opportunistic about it. And I'm going to let Tom take over and tell a little bit about our agency and how we made our changes. And hopefully that'll be helpful to you.
Hopefully for the folks that I've been providing technical assistance for many years too, I'm not going to bore you to tears with this story, but for the people who really haven't heard it before, I was hired when I guess I was about 30 to be the CEO of a fairly prestigious agency in DC that was failing. They had been a school for children who were higher functioning, intellectually disabled and related disabilities. And Public Law 94-142 had hit, and most of those kids were pulled back into the public schools. So we quickly, when I became CEO, began to focus on folks with more complex, severe disabilities and started looking at all ages because this population was unserved. and deinstitutionalization was occurring at the same time. So within a few years, we rapidly grew. We created one of the largest early intervention programs. Our school program had more children, and especially with autism and other complex disabilities. We created a sheltered workshop, created a Medicaid day treatment adult program, facility-based, and began buying houses and had a number of ICFMR residential programs. We grew so large, so quick. We went from about a $300,000 budget to a $10 million budget in just a few years. And it began to make all of us think of, where is this going? You know, I was fairly young at the time, and I had never done this before. And my staff was growing, and we were in Northwest DC, which was a very affluent part of town, and had all these group homes and all these facility-based programs. And my board was proud and happy, but they became very worried about, where is this going? I should be on mute. So we began to wonder, you know, just what is our mission? What's going to be our capabilities and our expertise for the future? And we took a look at our mission, and I think this is really important. This is ground zero. This is where your transformation begins. That our mission was operating a center for children with mental retardation to reach their greatest potential. We looked at that and looked at that. We began to have weekly breakfast meetings every Friday from 7 to 9 o'clock. The core board members and my senior staff trying to hash out, is this really the mission? To operate a center, operate a building is our mission for children with mental retardation. I mean, mental retardation is an old term, we don't use it anymore. Our people were more diverse than that, and they weren't children. We were serving adults. And to reach their greatest potential actually meant nothing. And as I go around the country providing technical assistance, 90% of our agencies have such broad missions that are almost meaningless. So we kept hashing this out and working towards, what is our new mission? We examined our vision for people with disabilities. What were our core values of, you know, what people should be experiencing in terms of quality of life. And we finally came up with a new mission together. And as a real hardcore planning team of advancing community supports and opportunities for people living with disabilities. And suddenly we realized community support and opportunities, that didn't have anything to do with a building. So we really started transforming, and Jenny's going to go more in depth into the how-to, but we started creating opportunities for competitive integrated employment and integrated community engagement. And this was in the mid-'80s that no one heard of. There were really hardly any funding streams. There was no political will. I actually had 3 different letters from the commissioner in DC telling us to return to the building, or they were going to put us out of business. And we fought that. We ended up, after, it took us years, but we were 100% in the community. We had sold all our buildings. We went straight to renting facilities to give us more flexibility. We moved our early intervention program from a center-based, I think we had 115 or more children coming every day to a center-based program. We moved it all into daycare centers where they could participate with children without disabilities. We took our school program and we cut deals with the public schools for empty space. And we ended up with 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, 3 elementary schools across the city, so kids could more easily participate in neighbor schools instead of being on a hot, unair conditioned, no aid bus for 2 hours each way. Our adult day services, we moved into the community of real life experiences to advance people's quality of life. And we use that as a jumping off into employment activities. We just closed our shelter workshop. Genni came to me one day and said, "It's done, we're closed." It was quite the surprise. We took our group homes that we owned and we sold them. And we moved everybody, and all this is by choice, and it was a lot of education of staff and parents. We moved into apartments throughout the city. So it was a major transformation. It went so well, we started to be invited into other states. So we ended up in 5 states. And each state was a little different of how we had to structure it. But they all had pretty much the same resources. A lot of people think, oh, you know, big cities, they have a lot more going on than small towns. That's actually not true. It's really about relationships and building relationships. And how do you move people to the places that you've identified? In our urban settings in DC and Philly, we use public transportation. And, you know, you can check out the local paper and find a lot of things. We're going to talk about how we've identified these resources in the community in a little bit. But we move people around pretty much by public transportation for the most part. In our suburban settings, like Northern Virginia and Memphis and some of the other locations, it was a mixed bag. They had transportation, usually during commuting hours for people going to work. So we had to use that, but we supplemented it with other vans and sometimes with staff vehicles. And then in the more rural areas, like Martin, Tennessee and Leesburg, Virginia, it was more of our vehicles, vans, sedans, staff vehicles, moving people around. But we were able to sit down and plan with our team to make this happen. And it's having the mission, having a clear understanding what, you know, our mission was the driving force. Every staff person knew every day they were supposed to connect people to the community. And what we're most proud of, at least Tom Wiles is we did a CARF survey in 2010, and we did all 5 states simultaneously. And this is the part of the report that came out. The leadership of St. John's is recognized for its continued passions for its mission and core values that have been maintained and nurtured since its founding 140 years ago. By driving social change through its history, St. John's has fought for equality and acceptance for people with disabilities. We were an advocacy group. Is not only a statement that looks good in printed materials, but truly provides the content and the direction of the organization. Everyone involved with the St. John's walk their talk because everybody knew the mission. So it can be done. It takes, I think, the bottom line of defining your mission and a lot of team planning. Genni?
Okay, thank you. We have talked a lot about foundational stuff, and we need to get to some nuts and bolts. So we're going to be doing that now. So one thing I hope we can encourage people to do is to begin to think differently about community-based services, and really think of all the phenomenal things that can be accomplished in providing supports in the community. I am a tremendous advocate of community-based day services, whether it's community-based day hab or whatever the term the states are using for their particular version of that service. But it's a great way to get people in the community to become prepared for employment. If you structure your community-based services well, they can be great companions to employment for part-time workers as they wrap around. It's a perfect vehicle for community engagement. And for those who are retired, and we served many people who were 80 and even some into their 90s in community-based supports. So it is very flexible. It is very normalizing. It's like your life and mine, hopefully, but great things can be accomplished. I'm going to start by talking about, and I'm just going to use the term community-based day services, and please interpret that as according to what your waiver rules are for the services that you have. But using it as a pathway to the community. Say there's a person, and this will often happen, who is unsure about what he or she would like to do in the community. So you basically say, we'd like to go out in the community. What is it you're interested in? And they sort of have no idea. So what do you do next? Well, you can go straight into your community-based day services and use them to get people out there, introduce them to what is present in the community and understanding about what resources are available. There's a lot of exploration of the community that folks need to do. Because if you have been in a situation where you've had a pretty controlled life and you've spent a lot of time in the facilities, or you've spent time at home with families but haven't really been taught how to access the resources that are available in your community, or you're not even aware of them, then there's lots that we can do to help people become aware of those things. Things like libraries. And by the way, libraries are of the current day are not like the libraries of old. There's many, many activities and many things, resources that are available in libraries. There's cultural resources that people who are seeking to explore their community need to know about. Things like theaters, where you have actual live plays, or movie theaters, or available concerts, or musical activities. There's civic groups people can become involved with. There are classes that folks can take. We've had folks involved in cooking classes, craft classes, routine exercise classes. Certainly through volunteerism, you meet a lot of people, and that's a great way to learn about your community. And then there's also spiritual activities. One of the greatest things that we did with an older group of folks that we were working with in one of our states is that this particular group of people were interested in gospel music, and the staff, some of the staff were aware of a church, a local church, where every Wednesday afternoon they did a gospel sing. Well, that was a marriage made in heaven. Perfect thing for people to go and participate in to satisfy their interest, but also to have them meet new people who had a common interest with them. Community life skill building occurs best in natural settings. In other words, the skills that one needs to conduct oneself as an adult in the community, the best way you learn how to do those things is by viewing and doing. You know, it is very difficult to teach someone how to do something that is a total abstraction when you already know that individual has difficulty with that type of learning. So I always give this example, even for myself. I went to an Excel class that was in a huge arena with one person with a computer down in the front trying to teach 125 people how to do Excel. And nobody else in the room had a computer. And I learned zero. I went home and I got an Excel for Dummies and I taught myself. Much easier for me to do than to just hear about or see. So there's lots of things that people need to see and learn about, but also learn how to do. There's community safety that people need to learn about, simple things like crossing the streets and knowing to whom to go to if there's an emergency or how to handle that. People need to learn how to access things like banks, stores, as I mentioned earlier, libraries, community centers. I believe anyone who can learn to travel independently, we should certainly focus on that. But even if that's not going to be the case, if someone's always going to require some support to travel, it's still to your benefit to learn to use public transportation should that be available. Also, the community lends itself to helping people learn how to communicate in a more useful way and to develop social connections and develop appropriate means of social interaction. Relationship development, we're going to come back to time and time again because it's such an important thing. Relationships are everything, and I'll talk a little more about that later. And it's an opportunity to make a contribution. Those of you who were present with us yesterday, I talked a lot about changing the perception society has of people with disability. A lot of that perceptual change comes by people participating, by being present, by making contributions. And when that occurs, we begin to accomplish that social change that we're all looking for. Now, I am a huge advocate of using community-based day services as a pathway to employment specifically. So if a person is undecided about whether they want to work at all, or they think they want to work, but they're not sure what they want to do, what can we do next? Well, hey, we can do a lot through community-based day services. We can do such things as going to workplaces to visit or take a tour. We can have a job tour where perhaps we're going to several different places to observe someone doing a particular, or someone's doing a particular kind of job that someone may have an interest in. There's job shadowing, which may be following a particular individual doing a job over the course of an extended period of time. Of course, there's volunteerism, which I am a huge advocate of, particularly when someone is trying to find out, what is it that I really enjoy doing and they don't have a lot of experience. They've got to go out and sample some things. A great way to do that is by volunteering in a number of different areas. Interestingly, I myself, when I first moved to Washington, D.C., probably some 45 years ago, I volunteered in a sheltered workshop before I eventually was hired there because I didn't know quite what they did, and I wanted to learn about it, and it led me on the path I am on today. You can conduct situational assessments. You can have individuals join you or conduct themselves an informational interview with an employer or employees to learn more about a business, and you can even create things like job clubs. So there's lots you can do and community-based services to help people learn about the possibilities that are out there for work. This is also a great way to build skills. And as I said earlier, I believe in learning by viewing and doing. And we know that the people we support generally learn best that way. So, if you are thoughtful and you structure schedules appropriately and do your community mapping, both of which we're going to talk more about in a minute, then there are actually employment skills, specific types of employment skills for specific occupations that can be developed through volunteerism, through having involvement in internships. So, there's opportunity to really get out there, hands-on learning something that you can then subsequently use in your employment. There's classes and workshops that people can attend. Your one-stops, I forgot what they're called these days, American Service Centers or whatever. They have classes on resume writing and certain interviewing strategies, etc. We have, if you'll remember, through ADA and our ability to access public services, we have the right to join into some of those classes. We can spend lots of time helping people with job seeking skills and travel training, which if you are in a position where that's a vital skill, that's certainly something that can be taught hands-on. I think one of the critical skill or the critical sets of skills that people can learn, and really these are soft skills for employment, but they actually are important skills just for life. And there are things like travel, which I've already discussed, dressing appropriately for work or for whatever activity one is going to be engaged in. Like I knew today that at least from the waist up, I had to look nice and neat because I was going to be with you. So, you know, it is an opportunity to help people understand there are norms and there are mores and that we want to abide by those. And again, learning to communicate and socially interact, a workplace, a volunteer site, an activity site in the community is an excellent place to learn that. It is very difficult to learn some of those skills in isolation of the real world. You can also help people understand time management, schedule management. I think sometimes we are not teaching those skills, and yet they're vital skills for work. You guys have to do that every day of your life. And one thing that I think we neglect, and I think it's very important, is the notion of helping people understand what it means to make a commitment. We are very lax sometimes in having people with disabilities make and keep commitments. And in doing so, we are not teaching people one of the most vital skills for employment in particular, and that is when you take a job, you are making a commitment and you are promising that you're going to keep up one end of a bargain. And also, when we are in natural environments, there are instances where things happen that are natural consequences to some of the things people may or may not do. And of course, we don't want anyone to be injured in any way, and I'm not advocating that, but sometimes feeling the consequence, a natural consequence, is the best teaching that's ever going to occur. So, is this one? Whether the whether the focus is work prep or community skills development, it's all about relationships. I said this yesterday, I'll repeat it, and I hope you're hearing this. One-time visits to places, events, or activities don't provide opportunities for relationships to develop. Folks have to have some routines and places that they're going on a routine basis in order to meet people with whom they have a common interest and to get to know people. So, you know, relationships are everything. And I'm sure you're all feeling that, particularly in this time of COVID. I can't see my son, who is a direct service worker with people with long-term mental illness, because he is too risky for me at age 69 to be around. You know, so that relationship is so important to me, and yet now I can't fully realize it. We're all in that position, and it's hurting us because relationships are vital to our satisfaction with our life. And so our folks that we support tend not to have a lot of relationships beyond that of people who are paid to be with them or people with whom they are grouped for whatever reason, whether that's by choice or not. And that's not how you would want to live. That is not how I would want to live. We really need to support our staff to understand and have the skill to help people cultivate relationships. But you got to be, you know, in a place where you can be with people before you can cultivate those relationships. So that's very, very important. So how do we get started? This is where the rubber hits the road, guys. Well, and Thomas said this, and I'll say it, and I can't say it enough. It's really important that everybody understand. That means the support coordinator and the person and the family and the staff and all the associated people understand what you are trying to accomplish. What is it that we're trying to do? We're not just going out in the community for the heck of it. We are going out to the community for very specific purposes. And if everybody understands that and sees what you're trying to accomplish as being worthy, then you will have support. If you just spring out there and families aren't well informed and individuals aren't well informed, and nobody really understands why you're doing what you're doing, or if, God forbid, you tell families that you're doing this because you are mandated to do that, I would never do such a thing, then it's going to be difficult for you. So we got to get everybody on board with understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. We also must do a great job of conducting community mapping activities. I would advise people, and trust me, I know from the old school of hard knocks, because I've done this for a very long time, not having an adequate amount of activities for people to be involved in, and then going out in the community and wandering around and doing nothing you're asking for trouble. It is not going to go well for anybody, the staff, the individual, the community. And Tom will talk to you in a bit about community mapping. But, first we need to know the array of things that people may be interested in, conduct our community mapping so that we have an abundance of those activity options, and then you're going to be in good stead. I'll talk to you more in a bit about how to identify some of the interests to get started with that, and also how to do some of the mapping. Okay, but it's always important to think carefully about what you're trying to accomplish, and stay focused in this service. So here's some things I thought about with COVID-19, and everybody has said this, and I said it yesterday, so I'm going to say it one more time. Nobody has this in the bag, okay? I work in many states, and some of our colleagues on the phone do too, and it's not like everybody just has this great roadmap and they know exactly what they're doing. We don't exactly know what the future is. Norms are changing. So we, meaning all of us on this call, have to adjust to new norms. And then we also have to help our individuals adjust to new norms. We have to identify what those norms are. So it's going to be a little bit complex, but we will work our way through it. But I would say if you are developing new activity sites, it is going to be very, like say a volunteer site, very important to learn what that agency is doing to protect its staff and its volunteers and visitors. What are they doing in terms of their physical layout? What material or equipment would you need for your folks to be safe there? Is it PPE? Are they providing it? Are you providing it? Exactly what is the standard going to be? If you're going back to some place that you have been previously, say you had previously had folks who volunteered at the Red Cross, then you would want to be, I would be reaching out to, I would have been touching base with those folks across this period of time we've been in quarantine, just seeing how they're doing, where this is going. Once we're getting close to getting back out in the community, finding out from them, do you have new procedures? What is your policy going to be on physical spacing? What is your expectations for the use of PPE for staff and individuals? There's a lot of talking that we're going to need to do with folks, just to see where is it we can go that people will be safe, that we will be welcome, and that will be beneficial to the individuals, meaning sites that they're in, activities they're interested in. It's very important to prepare your staff before you really turn loose with doing a lot of community-based activities. And the first thing is identifying what competencies people need. What do you want them to have under their belt in terms of skills, so that they can be successful in your work, and the individuals that you support will be successful in acquiring the outcomes they're interested in acquiring. And skills and competencies are one thing, but for me, I think equally important when you're talking community are qualities and characteristics in the staff. And by qualities and characteristics, I mean things like, able to operate autonomously, able to problem solve quickly, able to manage a crisis, able to negotiate and compromise, having a very strong work ethic, come heck or high water, you'll stay on the job, you'll do what you must. All of being extremely self-directed and self-motivated. Those are qualities and characteristics. They're different from skills and competencies. But if you think about the world that we're moving into and have been for some time, where staff are often in the community with individuals. In an organization like ours, we wouldn't see staff for days because they just met up with people in the community and they went and did stuff and people went home and that was the day. And so we didn't necessarily always see them. We had to know that they were able to operate in the community independently with a less amount of supervision than they had they been in the facility, to ensure that our individuals were going to be safe and that they were going to get a quality service. So we really had to back up, and it's absolutely imperative, I think, for you to do the same. Back up then and relook at everything you're doing in terms of how you are soliciting staff, bringing them on board, and subsequently training and supporting them. So that means we've got to relook at job descriptions and make sure that they are reflective of the skills and competencies that you're seeking, as well as the qualities and characteristics that you're seeking. The recruitment strategies that we have used before are not necessarily the recruitment strategies that are going to attract desirable staff at this point in time. First of all, we've moved electronic even prior to the pandemic, and that's even gone further at this point. A lot of interviewing remotely, even some orientation remotely that I've been hearing about. But the recruitment strategies need, when you're recruiting, the language that you're using in recruiting people ought to be reflective of the qualities and characteristics you're looking at people. And what I mean by that is this: if you start an ad and it's something like, are you a motivated, self-directed, energetic person who loves to meet new people and is comfortable in new situations? That is literally how we started doing our ads. It wasn't, do you want to work with people with disabilities? That wasn't really necessarily the important part of what we're looking for. I want to know who you are. I want to know what you have in terms of those qualities and characteristics that are going to make life better for the people that you will be supporting. And so if you begin advertising that way, if in your interview you ask questions that elicit information about the qualities and characteristics that person holds, you will have a better chance of finding the right person. I always say I can teach you to work with people with disabilities fairly easily. I cannot teach you to be self-motivated. I cannot teach you to be able to work autonomously. Those are things you generally come with. So we want to ferret out those people who have those. The staff who are going to just transition, who have historically been in the facilities, there's no reason to believe that they can just transition without retraining. That is extremely unfair to them, and it's very risky. They need new job descriptions. They need to be retrained so they can understand what their future responsibilities are. The orientation and initial training for new staff is critical. First impressions are everything. And if you think about it, I've encouraged you to include qualities and characteristics you're seeking in advertisements, to speak to them in interviewing, and you want to hit that again in your orientation. You're constantly reiterating the philosophy and the values of the agency, what we're trying to accomplish and what is going to be important for them. And finally, because ours was an agency without facilities, if I hired someone, they were going to go directly in the field with individuals, right? That's a little dicey. It felt dicey to me because we didn't yet know that person extremely well. So we developed a mentor-mentee relationship with our more seasoned staff and our new staff, pairing them and actually letting the more seasoned staff let us know when they thought that person was ready to be alone in the community with the individuals they were going to support. I just said a lot of this, but I will reiterate some of it. As I said, philosophy is critical. If people don't embrace the concepts, they can't do the job. We need to emphasize the importance of their role and what is expected of them. Remember my whole series of my conversation yesterday about seeing ourselves as change agents, seeing this as a civil rights movement for people, having people embrace those concepts because they're important concepts to embrace, but also how that staff, how it makes them feel about their job and their role and the importance thereof. We also have to train people on the how-tos. What are the policies? What are the procedures? How do we do X, Y, and Z? And in our agency, we created a program manual for staff that really told them, you know, how to do everything so that they had that resource available to them. Tom mentioned this yesterday, but I will touch on it again. For some of the things that people are learning, customized employment being a primary example, there are some things that we actually have to have field-based training and mentoring for in order for people to attain those skills. So, you know, if you think about it, if we're going to provide more supports in the field to individuals, we're actually going to have to provide more supports in the field to staff as well. And again, we need to focus on helping people understand what a teachable moment is and how to take advantage of that. And then finally, one thing that I thought that was really important, you know, performance evaluations make people nervous, you know, almost no matter what. But what we did that kind of helped that situation is our twice a year managers would go out and make observations of staff in the field. And what they were observing for was, had that staff absorbed the competencies from the training they had had? And if they hadn't, they couldn't demonstrate it. Then there was no punishment. It was simply saying, what can we do? Is it retraining? Can I just coach you? Can I pair you with somebody else? How can we get you up to snuff on this skill? Now, if that happened over and over and over, you might have a performance problem, but I think we're trying to take the onus off of that uncomfortable evaluation concept and really put it back on managers and on the training we were able to provide. So you have to start somewhere, right? When you are going to be working with people in the community. So you have to have some notion, you know, of where to begin. And people may think, I've known this person for, you know, 40 years. I know all about them. But I would ask you to maybe reserve judgment on that. We think we know people, but we have known people under certain circumstances. And so we actually have sort of a limited understanding of that person. So in our agency, we used a tool called the Positive Personal Profile. It is a tool that is used in customized employment. There are several schools of customized employment. Transcend uses the Positive Personal Profile. We adopted that document, but there are others. Griffin Hammis uses, or Mark Gold, and those would all be fine. But the notion is you've got to start somewhere and say, you know, what is it that this person has shown some interest in, or that we have some indication that they have an interest in, so we can at least create a preliminary schedule for that person in the community. And so they can try some things out. We may subsequently go into a more permanent schedule or structured schedule once we have a handle on some of those things. But we use the Positive Personal Profile also to have a singular document that would capture information over time. Because we could use that document to capture information, and I'm going to tell you how to do all this, to capture information when people were in community-based day services. And then subsequently, if they went into discovery, that information could just simply be expanded upon. So it actually sort of gave a leg up. It's also the Positive Personal Profile and the information we collected on it also helped us figure out how to provide a wraparound service that was meaningful, or meaningful retirement for people who are post-working age. A word on post-working age. By the way, if someone is retired and they're 45, they better either be extremely wealthy or there needs to be some other explanation. Most of the time when I hear someone's retired and they're that young age, it means we don't know what to do with them. Working age, retirement should occur at working age. And by the way, I'm 69 and Tom is 72 and we're still working. All right. So this is, again, the positive personal profile. I'll show you a picture in a second, but it's a tool to record information traditionally through discovery, but I think it can equally be used to capture some information from the community. And again, I will tell you how to do that. We're always looking for what the positive attributes of the person are, because those are the kinds of things, if the person's seeking employment, we're going to build upon to help them find the right job. But if it's a person who is in the community for community enrichment or learning about the community, it's also a good thing to know their attributes, because that's what's going to help introduce them into new groups of people. We need to have informational interests and preferences on what skills people have, what their support needs are. And we can use that information on the employment side to create a job search plan, and also it can be used for resumes and in preparation for interviews. But on the community-based day services side, it can be used, again, just for us to be able to have a more concrete way of looking at the actual experiences that person has had and what we have learned through those. Here's what that document looks like. So, I mean, there's nothing, too brilliant about the document. It is simply a form, but as I was saying earlier, if you can begin, and maybe this is a new person or someone you don't know very well, you can begin through an interview process or other means to try the best you can to fill out some of this information. I wouldn't write paragraphs and paragraphs. It's just phrases. What do we know now? And over time, we're going to expand this, and I'm going to show you how. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is simply one of the profiles that has been more vetted. And I'm going to let Tom take over now and talk a little bit about community mapping, that ever so important element of day services in the community.
So your goal is moving people out in the community to have a variety of experiences that hopefully will lead to work. And doing the personal positive profile, you've learned a lot more about the individual and what their strengths are, what their interests are. So how are you going to match that to these community experiences? Well, one, it's about relationships. Again, that you're going to talk to the participants themselves and know what they like to do, where they like to go. You're going to be talking to their parents, hopefully in the process, to learn more about them. You're going to talk to your staff. You're going to talk to board members. You're going to talk to a variety of community members. And you're going to start looking for a broad knowledge of the variety of opportunities that exist in the community. So you're looking for community involvement, different memberships, volunteering, maybe some organized learning activity. Some people might even go to a junior college or some other organized learning activity. Looking at what they're interested in and meeting like-minded people, like different clubs. Someone may want to learn to knit. And so, let's go down to the, local store where they sell yarn and that sort of thing and see if there's a club. So we're going to be looking for opportunities that are not specifically for people with disabilities. And we're going to be thinking about very small groups. We tried to do no more than 4 people. The smaller, the better. You don't want the traditional handicap parade where people are not going to have the opportunity to develop relationships. And you're going to stay away from these one-time events. This is not a field trip. This is, learning to have relationships and learning a variety of tasks that can lead to employment. Some of the things you're going to ask as you're mapping, you're going to, about the virus and how you're going to cope with that. What are the state rules? I actually don't know what Alabama has put out in terms of what their requirements are for the providers. So, you're going to have hopefully some state requirements or guidance. As you look for these sites, be they volunteer or education, recreation, employment, those sites may have their own requirements. So you're going to ask that too. You're going to ask parents, what are their expectations before you go out? So you're going to talk to all these people in your community and your staff, and you're going to start documenting. So you've got a database. I've known some providers that have actually computerized this so that, you're documenting, we're going to the American Heart Association, here's the address, here's the telephone number, here's the main contact, what kind of situation is this? Is this volunteer, recreation, education? What activities are these people going to do? And so forth. Do they need lunch? And what are the safety requirements for each place? I went to one agency one time, and I was on tour and asked, where's the group? And the manager said, well, they're out in the community. And what are they doing? And the young manager said, well, they went to the bread factory. They go to the bread factory several times a week. And it's like, oh, okay, you're developing relationships. Yeah. So why are they at the bread factory? What is the goal here? Well, they're getting bread. To do what? To go to the park to feed ducks. Well, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. And white bread is not good for ducks. So don't do that. It has to be a real learning activity with real goals and an outcome. That, to me, just seemed like van therapy. So you want to document this and then be able to share these experiences with the staff that are taking people out, and come to a planning meeting with your participants who have common interests to create the small groups that will be going to the variety of community resources that are out there. And eventually you're going to be mixing and matching groups so that you are affording people choices, which is very important in the settings rule. Not only going out into the community, but affording people choices to go to those activities that they really want to go to. So it's not always the same group going to the same places continually. You can mix and match people and have these planning meetings on a periodic schedule. And it's like Genni was talking about commitment. You might start out with, what's our schedule for the next 2 weeks? And eventually you might expand that to what is our schedule for the next 2 months. You want to find these activities, as Genni mentioned before, that help with travel options, travel training, the ability to see people do different tasks, new tasks, to learn new things about them. I remember so many staff just thrilled to realize that this person that they've known for 10 years really liked doing something that they had never experienced before because they were in the building. So you've got soft skill development, you're developing relationships, and you're got all these expectations for people being in the community, learning new skills and having new experiences. As they go out, and this will evolve over time, you're probably going to start at the facility to begin the day. But as you evolve and you have more teams going out into the community, you might actually start from the participant's home or their group home.
Just, if I can just add one thing. It may have been traditional that you would start from the community, but with people being home now, it is possible, and I don't know how it'll fall out in Alabama, that you actually may have many more people leaving for the day from home now. Because it sounds like some of the services are beginning to sort of mesh into a more uniform piece of fabric. But just to mention that, we may have actually gotten a springboard to start more naturally from home sites.
Right. And as you get away from your building and more people are out there, you may not need your building. We didn't really make a conscious decision of we don't want buildings anymore. It was an evolution that we started emptying our building and we started leasing space to other nonprofits. And as we emptied the building, not only did we move from the building and people coming from home, maybe their group home, but we also created other community sites. It was Starbucks and churches and the malls and the train station, and where people could have shelter, where they could have water, and where they could have bathrooms and wait for the rest of the group to meet up with them. So it evolves, and hopefully what you'll discover as time goes on is that you won't need your building as much, and you can begin to shift those resources. You know, everybody says, oh, you know, we don't have enough money to do all of this. Well, because you're putting so much money into your building. You've got mortgages, you're paying for heating, air conditioning, janitorial services, you know, a lawn care, all that kind of stuff. As you get further away from your building, you can shift those resources into technology and staff. And how do we get there? We talked about that a little bit earlier. You're going to use staff vehicles, public transportation. And the big thing is you're going to have a planning meeting, and you're going to treat these groups as individuals, and you're going to come up with separate remedies to get people where they want to go. And finally, in terms of considerations for coping with the virus, here's a little checklist. That in addition to asking the state and parents, you know, here's some things that you really need to consider, both for the individuals that you're providing services for and for your staff. You know, proper spacing. Do you have the PPE equipment? Are you sanitizing? Do you have a schedule? Are you taking temperature measurements? Do you have the equipment to do that? And how are you going to support people who are compromised or have behavior challenges? It's all going to be on an individual basis. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Tom. All right. Let's talk about schedules, because this is usually where people can get their heads around what we're talking about. So, you know, what the process we've talked about so far is finding out what your individuals may have an interest in or want to learn about, community mapping, so you can identify those places in the community that you can go to and those skills or interests can be satisfied. And then there's sort of figuring out groups of people which need to be compatible, groups of people who have some common interest. If you indeed are in a position where you're having to group, if you have a single person, that's not such a challenge. But then you're putting together schedules. And this particular sample schedule is one that is for a pathway to employment. So I'll just point out a couple of things. You'll notice that it's very specific. And it disturbs me when I see a schedule that doesn't have specificity in it, because we need to know what people are doing and where they are. So we were very specific. If you can see in the first box from 9 to 9:15, it talks about arriving at the meetup place. And then in parentheses, we have some tips for the staff. If you're there and say you were going to be with 2 people that day and one person comes and you're waiting for the second person, don't just waste that time. Here's some things that we can be talking about. You'll note under that the time frame is specified for exactly how long it's going to take to travel, what means we are going to use to travel, and once again, some tips for staff for things to keep your eyes open for, teachable moments that are going to avail themselves in the community. From there, we talk about, in this case, we're going to Red Cross. What are we going to be doing there? What things to focus on while we're there, and then where we're going to have lunch, and then it would proceed from there. And as you can see, the schedule spreads across the week. But it's very specific. And I want to emphasize that it also has a lot of routine in it. In other words, as I said earlier, and Tom said, we don't want a one-shot deal after one-shot deal, but people going to places on a routine basis, because that's what is expected when you are working, is that there is routine and there is commitment. And so we're trying to build that in folks through developing a schedule that indeed has routine and commitment within it.
But still choices.
But still choices, because the choices are expressed as the schedule is being developed and the people are participating in that. This is a schedule, and I'll just go over it quickly. It's for wraparound, which becomes more complicated. And, you know, you will find scheduling becomes complicated. And I always say we need air traffic controllers for our work now. But in this schedule, and I'll allow you to review it for yourself, you can see that some individuals are coming in and out of the schedule because they work part-time and they are getting the support part-time. So again, a little more complex, but doable. I think I said this earlier, but one of the things I become distressed about is when we don't collect the information on people while we are supporting them. It's not fair to those individuals if we just lose that information and we don't record it, or we reassess people on things that they've done a million times and they know how to do. So we really want to make this whole experience of being in the successful and valuable, and lead somewhere for people. Being in the community is an opportunity for people to learn things, but it's an opportunity for staff to make some assessment of people in natural settings and be able to identify some important things. I will quickly go over, this is not a form, this is a Word document. If anyone, I've shared it with Byron, he has it. If you're ever going to use it, you'll need to make it into a form. But at any rate, what you'll be able to see here is this is intended to help staff record information that's valuable in those community sites. In this one, we want to know first and foremost things like environmental reaction to the particular place that the person went. If you have worked with people who don't respond equally well to all environments, which we all have, then you know the importance of that. And if you're thinking of the future of being employment, we particularly need to know what kind of environment the person prefers. You will note where it says task 1. Actually, I'll go to the next one. This is the filled out one. There we're noting what the person can already do independently. They gathered their materials, they laid them out, and they put them together correctly to form a packet. This was at Red Cross where they're making packets for blood donors. So we know that they can do those things. Let's capture that. But an important element that we may overlook is whether they prefer that. Folks, I can do a lot of things, and many of them I do not prefer to do. So, there's a difference between being able to do things and preferring to do things. Also, you'll notice on this form where it says skill emerging, that's where we see someone does not yet have a skill, but they could learn it. They are showing evidence of being able to learn that. That's where we would want to focus our training. And then finally, at the bottom, you see where it says support required. That may be an area where there's a need for significant support And it may be something we aren't able to overcome, meaning in this case, and I use myself as the example, this person chats with people who are close to them, and that disturbs the workflow. That may not be able to be ameliorated. It wasn't with me when I was a kid in school. But so if I'm a job developer in the future, I receive this information, I know I can't put that person in a job where they're too close to others and have them be successful because their Achilles heel is talking to their neighbor.
Or you're a Q doing a monthly report, you've got all this data then.
Yeah, I'm talking about that. There's a second poll. Suzanne, can we pull up that poll real quick? Yeah, there you go. Okay, this poll says, does your agency currently collect meaningful data from community-based services experiences that is used to facilitate person-centered planning and increase community engagement? So really, are you currently in a position where you're collecting not just ISP data, but beyond that, meaningful data that's going to help that person move into employment or some future endeavor? It's fun to see this poll move. And please vote as many of you as possible. We're going to try to get at least to 50% or close there, and then we will share the results.
Genni, on your signal, we'll close this, and then folks will be able to see the results as you're summarizing.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I didn't do that well last time. Thank you.
No, we're learning together. It's okay.
Okay, I have about 30%, 36%, almost 40%. Let's see if we can get up to at least 50 real quick. Come on, folks, you can do it. Suzanne, I think we'll just go ahead and close that poll. Now we have about 40-some% in the interest of time. Okay, and folks can see that now. And what you'll see, some, of the respondents, about 45% indeed feel like they're doing a good job with this. About 8% are doing something, but they're not so sure about it or whether it gets to the appropriate people. Some, bless your hearts, confess right off the bat that you don't collect stuff beyond the ISP data, and some people just feel like they're sort of a work in progress. So thank you, Suzanne, and thank you folks who took the time to vote. We can close the poll now. Or I can close it. All right, I closed it.
That's good.
All right.
So about more than 50% need help.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Okay. So I'm going to do this quickly because I'm running out of time, and I apologize for having to go so fast. It is one thing to collect data. It is worthless if you don't do something with it, and you all have had experiences with that. So it is important, and in our organization, we made sure that we identified someone, and in our case, it was the case manager type person who was already writing quarterly reports. So they were able to take that documentation that I showed you earlier and review that, which they needed to do anyway as they're doing their quarterly reports. And they used that to update the PPPs. So there was a singular person who synthesized all of that information and used it to make that positive personal profile a richer document. And by the way, we didn't collect this data every day. We collected it on some kind of routine basis that we established. It would be too much to do daily. That information that goes into that profile, again, is not going to be useful unless you have some sort of internal mechanism for prioritization, especially for employment. It is very easy for people to get stuck in a training mode forever, and we do not want that to happen. We don't want the departments to become siloed with no communication. So if you have the ability to create a body of people with reps from community day services, employment, case management, residential, that group can come together and they can help prioritize who is the next most important to come up for employment. If you are a believer in employment first, which I am, and that means that you believe that all people can work with the right supports, then theoretically everybody you have could be up, for employment right now, and physically you can't do that. So whether you are aware of it, you're already prioritizing. I'm just suggesting that you want to develop a method for prioritization that is structured and based on information you have on that person from the experiences they've had. In case, and this is, probably going to be your story for a while, in case your opportunities in the community are limited for some while, I just wanted to make sure that I gave you a couple of ideas, and there are many, many more, of things that you could do. ICI, I would go to their website, their Think Work and Think College, and they have great resources there. This is something that came from the ODEP website, and I can give you the web address to get to it. It's Skills to Pay the Bills, which is generally used for transition age young adults. However, this information that's provided can be adapted and made workable for adults. And these are just some ideas of some places that you can go, and you can go to Smithsonian Natural History or Air and Space, or you can go to Travel and Leisure and travel around the world. There are many virtual opportunities that are available. You can read the summary. I'm just going to hush now. We only have about a little less than 10 minutes left, and I really wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have.
Genni and Tom, thank you so much. Folks, if you are close to your keyboard, take a moment to think about any final questions or comments. If there's something that's resonated with you from the information that they've shared today, now is a great time to let them know that. If you're not seeing the chat on your screen, there's a black menu bar, which sometimes could be at the top of your screen. It may also be at the bottom. If you hover over that, you should see a white outline of a chat space. If you click on that, you can then enter your comment, type in your comment, and then click on enter or return on your keyboard. Genni, are you seeing there's a question that's come in?
No, we can't see the chat box. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we'll read this off to you. This comes in from Alabama. Sounds like you and Tom and your staff started out with a vision as a nonprofit. I'm guessing your board of directors were involved in this drastic process. Let us know what you did to get your board members on board. Did you have parents and self-advocates on your board also?
Yes. It really started out with Genni had began to place some folk who were fresh out of the institution, who were major behavior problems, in real competitive employment, and we started to see them change dramatically. And here's Tom buying multi-million-dollar buildings, and the board, we started showing these success stories, and it was like they were concerned about why are we buying buildings and what are we doing? And so we took the key leadership, and some of them were parents, heavy duty business people, had a 4-star general, and we started meeting every Friday to hash it out. And that's where we came up with the mission. And the board went back, those players went back to the rest of the board, we went back to the rest of the staff, we created a communication plan, and we were off and running. The beginning was the mission, advancing community support and opportunities for people living with disabilities. And there was no building in that mission.
I would also add that, and I would advise people, we had a plan. So if a family member was concerned, we could say, here's the plan, here's the staff training, here's the staff manual, here's the oversight. So we could really assure people in advance we had thought everything through and that we were ready to go. There was apprehension from some families,
And board
and some
members.
board members. Interestingly, only a couple of individuals left us and they came back. So, we did, it's about educating, it's about being prepared and assuring people you're prepared, helping them understand the outcome and listening to what they're
And it's
concerned.
taking success stories
Yeah.
and sharing those. Even staff had reservations. So we started out with volunteers into this brave new world. And they came back all excited. There were participants who really didn't want to go. And others who volunteered came back all excited, and they sold their peers.
That's basically true. If that helps.
And we did that in 5 states. Yeah.
Maybe to expand a bit on that, did you look for different board members after you started to go into a different mindset? Did you start to look for certain qualities in different people around the community?
Yeah, it was just like staff. We began to really screen. Sometimes it's who's got a friend who wants to be a board member. But we started taking people on field trips and seeing the variety of placements we had and seeing if the board members would buy into it. And we also asked ourselves, who did we need on the board? Do we need a banker? Do we need an attorney? Do we need an insurance person? So we had, a matrix of board skills that we needed to begin with. And then after we, identified some people, we would begin a screening process to see if it was the right match.
They too needed to be community connected. Just as we began to look for staff who were community connected, we looked for board members who were community connected because they were going to help us make partnerships that we needed.
Great. Another question came in about from an organization in Alabama. I feel we're doing a great job at community integration for our individuals, and they enjoy many activities. Where I, as a QIDP, is having trouble is outlining training for the sites and volunteerism we are doing to fulfill the 3 learning opportunities required by our state. Any tips on how to translate rec, leisure, and volunteering into learning objectives with 3 or more steps? We're getting into technical stuff now.
Yeah, no, I understand the question because, we spend our life figuring out how to skate around on a very thin ice sometimes. Anything, if a person, just think of the data collection I just showed you. If a person is at American Red Cross and their task or their assignment is to put together packets for blood donors, that is it is the task of doing that, but it includes many other things. It includes organizational skills. It often will include communication skills. It's
Social skills.
So you are looking at what you're trying to teach the person, and then you have real activities that are occurring in the community that are the vehicles for that teaching.
How to dress.
Yeah. So I don't believe there's anything that a person needs to learn that can't be done in the community.
Excellent. Here's a question about, did your pay scale change for the staff?
Originally it did. With the very first group of staff we had, we raised their salaries. But remember, we became deeply involved in resource reallocation. So our focus began to shift from facilities and monies that we were investing there to investing in staff. And we were able to do that because we freed all that money up. Now that's not the simplest thing in the world to do, but at some point, every agency has to say to itself, what resources do I have? How am I using them? And am I using them optimally to accomplish the goals that I have stated I want to accomplish? And if that's not the case, then that's where some hard decisions and juggling comes.
And that was every part of the organization, from coming up with creative transportation to We had several secretaries to begin with. Everybody, had their own typists, and we, pared that down, and everybody got their own computers. We trained staff on computer use. But we ended up with some of the best benefits for staff that you can't imagine. And typically a higher salary, and flexible working conditions, where Genni would let direct service staff do their paperwork from home if they wanted to.
Right. It's thinking out a big thinking outside the box opportunity.
One more question. One of our participants has said, we have so many community connections and we have a breakdown in training or learning opportunities then to turn those activities into jobs and further meaningful training for people. That's a great question. How do you go from gathering these experiences and then take it the next step?
Yeah, well, hopefully people are going through discovery subsequent to having these experiences, and that will help narrow down further what the person's interest in, and you be able to do that job search plan. But, if you are involving people, I believe that particularly when someone is volunteering, I treat it like work. You got to be on time. You got to be dressed properly. You better call out. All of those things. You may use the community and your activities and your interactions within to teach somebody almost anything. And I think if you reflect on what we've been teaching people over the years, when we have had people in sheltered work, or we have had people working on crews where they come in and out of work on the crew, those may not really be teaching people the proper skills for work. Because I worked in a sheltered workshop, and you could not come, you could leave early, you could throw a fit in the middle of the day, you could refuse to work, you could rip all your clothes off, you could not get fired to save your soul. So what we were inadvertently teaching in that situation is you can behave any way you want, and it's okay. When you are with people in the community, they can't do those things. And they understand that they can't do those things. And they are learning through that experience all of these detailed skills that are going to be required to help them be successful in work. It's really taking the mindset of anything I need somebody to learn, I can teach them through these experiences in the community if I just think it through and figure out a strategy.
And I think too, it goes back to what Genni said about relationships. It's really about developing relationships. I know one of my providers that I've worked with in Alabama started going to Walmart and asking the HR director, could they help doing just practice interviews? And they agreed to do that. And could we do a tour of Walmart, to show the different jobs that are available? And could we practice shelving a shelf,
Stocking,
yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And they kept expanding this relationship until the person actually hired a couple of their people. So it can take so many different forms of how you develop relationships.
But one thing I just want to add quickly is do read the federal guidance on what is allowed under volunteerism, because one thing that disarms me completely is when I hear someone has someone volunteering in a for-profit business, which is precluded by the federal law. So we have to be careful doing that. And the notion is not you go volunteer someplace and you're volunteering there to get hired, because indeed that is part of what is precluded by the law. You're volunteering there to learn some skills. That's not necessarily where you will work. Sometimes it might be, but it's not meant to be a tryout for a job. It's meant to be a skill development opportunity. Then subsequently that person through the work that'll be done in discovery and through job development will be able to be matched to a job that is appropriate for them and beneficial to an employer.
And you're creating a resume and you're getting references from the
Right.
volunteer people. And you can do a visual, resume.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
One more question that came in. Just sorry, this will take us into a little different direction. But did you use the model of where providers are paid by the number of hours that an individual works?
That model is very new. Our friend Lisa Mills has sort of evolved that model recently. So no, that was not an option. However, I do know that model, and if one contemplates it, it makes a lot of sense. In other words, the way we are paid currently, it's sort of designed to put you out of business. If you're successful, every time you're successful in someone's place, you no longer get paid. That's kind of an interesting model. Whereas what the new model proposes is just what you said, that if I get somebody a job and they work 20 hours a week, I'm going to get paid for that 20 hours, whether I have a staff present or not. That's rewarding me for that accomplishment. Now, it's more complex than that, and that compensation trails off over time. But the notion that you're going to be rewarded for the number of hours a person works is an interesting, and I think one that is going to be pursued in the future.
Thank you both so much. I have this feeling we could just talk and talk, and we appreciate running over just a few minutes. I wanted to see, Byron, if you'd like to make a couple of closing remarks.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thanks.
Yes, okay. I'll make it quick since we have gone past 3. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Of course, I really appreciate Tom and Genni putting the presentation together the last couple of days and presenting some very good and useful information. Don't forget, week after next, on the 23rd, we have our interactive workshop schedule where we'll have folks from as far north as Pennsylvania to Montgomery on this call via Zoom, putting together a live workshop. So hopefully it'll be interesting, and we hope to be able to answer some of your questions from the survey that I mentioned earlier. And if you find out that you have not seen the survey or your director, you can either email me or reach out to your local regional CSD for that. And the cutoff is going to be Monday, so we'll have time to really analyze those survey results. Thank you again. Thanks.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Right, take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, Suzanne.
Suzanne. Thank